Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, the Grand Poobah Fraser, fresh off of his vow of silence. Big round of applause for Sejohn Sarowick. Sejohn.
Yeah, my vow of silence. I was not going to speak until next month. I mean, until next year's Brendan Fraser History Month. But no,
That's solemn. That would be a solemn thing to do. It's in reverence of the man.
Oh man. Yeah, no, for anybody that did not check out any of last month's recordings, I encourage you to go back and see what's up. The first few of them, we've got Will there as our Quizmaster General. And then we do our wrap-up episode where we talk about The Whale, and it was a big year this year for Brendan Fraser, so it was a big year for us at the Say Report. Yeah, it was a blast, man.
Yeah, it was a big year for Brendan Fraser, a big year for us, and can I tell you right now, first episode out of Brendan Fraser History Month, I'm so happy it's over. I mean, it's not like running a marathon. I know people who have run marathons. Will, in fact, has run marathons. So us podcasting and celebrating that man could never be compared to that because I'm sitting in a comfortable chair. My feet are firmly planted on the ground. I have good posture. I'm not going to hit a wall. I'm not going to throw up. But here's what happened on Friday. Friday, I went to the dentist. And during that dentist appointment, it was like having a massage. I was so relaxed for the first time, and that's because I didn't have to think about Brendan Fraser and what we were going to talk about Brendan Fraser, and that felt really good. To the fact that my dentist, Are you okay? Are you okay?
This is not the feeling most people have when they sit in this chair with you, I have to be honest. Sir.
I'm like, dude, it's just my body that's here. My mind is.
I don't know how I feel about the idea of a tooth massage.
Well, I mean, it's analogy. It did not feel like a tooth, but that sounds terrifying.
Exactly, right?
But no, like the way that like when you're getting a massage, like your mind tends to drift. I don't know. Have you ever had a massage, Sejohn? You seem like a man who enjoys the finer things in life.
I'm gonna work your gums for you.
No, it was good, but he's like, oh wow, your teeth are in really good shape. Please keep doing what you're doing. If you keep this up, you'll have your teeth forever. And then I'm like, cool. And he's like, are you okay?
You have a different experience at the dentist than I do whenever I go.
Well, you need to understand that working for Carnival Cruise Lines, you have full medical and dental, but at their discretion. So if you have a tooth problem or you need to get a cleaning, they will book you an appointment in the cheapest port that you're going to be in. You go to one Belize dentist, you learn to appreciate the dentistry that we get in the United States of America. And that happened as soon as I got real insurance again, because once I left that job at Carnival, I was able to do like the Cobra and be on my father's until I turned 26. So I had like 1 year where I could go to the dentist and get all of the problems that had manifested when I was going to go see Mexican dentists and Belizean dentists.
Well, I think that happened for a lot of us, right? Because there were some of us where like we had even like lost access to our parents' health insurance, and then the ACA like brought us back on, and there was a bunch of us around that time that were just like, "Fuck, go see all the doctors."
So I was there like almost every month going to a doctor in Massachusetts because it costs less getting fillings done and getting all sorts of work on my teeth done, and then after that. I didn't have insurance for a brief time because I turned 26 and the ACA only covers you on your parents' insurance until you're 26. So then once I was fully employed at my next job, because I like temped for 3 years, I went into the dentist and they're like, all right, so they're in pretty good shape, but you would really benefit from a deep cleaning. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a deep tooth cleaning. I can't believe we're talking about the dentist. I apologize. It's totally my fault. But that is painful. Like a deep cleaning of your teeth is painful. And honestly, I'm like, I never want to do that again. So I said to the hygienist, I'm like, what do I need to do to make sure this never happens again? And down to the fact that like I have a prescription toothpaste that strengthens my enamel and all sorts of other stuff that I basically a bottle lasts me a year, which is pretty solid. Because also The ads, they use too much toothpaste in the ads. You only need like a little dot on your toothbrush to
Oh yeah,
actually.
no. Well, see, in my house we use some good old fashioned Arm and Hammer powder.
Nice. Yeah.
Oh man.
So in the
I
morning.
mean, what cruelty is this bullshit that like the open orifice that makes sure that we get like sustenance also is like one of the most painful parts of the body for a doctor to work on, and like we need to constantly stay on top of it. Like that seems a little unfucking fair.
It's because of the sustenance. It's all of the nerve endings that are in our mouths that allow us to experience sweet and sour and bitter. And I don't know the other one, but then umami. I
But it
know
is
umami. I
painful
don't know.
pleasure.
like all of those nerve endings, they're also connected to the nervous system by the fact that they're nerves. So it's a very thin threshold between pleasure and pain. To quote Caligula, I think Caligula said it.
I don't know. I was doing Hellraiser, but you Caligula works too. I think in this case.
I gotta watch the Hellraiser movies again. That's something that came up in May, and I'm like, we'll put it into box. We'll put it into Cenobite
Yeah,
box.
man,
for
that
June.
Hellraiser series that they did turned out to be pretty decent. I have a I don't know I am not a deep like I do not have a deep love for Clive Barker's work in like the Hellraiser series, but I do have a respect for it. So like I've ducked in and out of it from time to time, and there have been times where I've been impressed, and there have been times when I have not. And I think even Clive Barker would agree with that sentiment,
Oh,
right?
well, and Clive Barker's name is thrown on a bunch of things that Clive Barker didn't do. I'm gonna admit right
Right.
here, my favorite piece of Clive Barker's work is Children of Men.
Yeah. That's a good pull actually.
That's Clive
But
Owen,
this show
CJ.
is one of the first. This show is one of the first instances in a while that he's had some pretty hands-on
Oh, that's awesome.
say in the whole thing. So and it's evident by just some of the really good lore. I mean that's the best. That is the Clive Barker-ness that I do really love. Is he's a hell of a storyteller. Like the lore that he creates for his worlds is fascinating. And creepy and gross and dark and all that good stuff. And so I will always check out like his work, but I don't. But his name does not automatically mean high quality to me. Let me put it that way.
No, and that's unfortunate by the very nature of the
Wishmaster, isn't he? Didn't he also do the Wishmaster
I
series, or at
believe
least his
so.
name is on them?
He had some hand in it, but
Yeah.
but like Hellraiser, because of the licensing and the contracts that were signed, his name became part of the copyright there. So even if
Yeah.
it says Clive Barker's Hellraiser 19 in 3D, that doesn't mean that he necessarily worked on it. But it was a photo of the skinless woman. I think her name's Lisa.
Oh no. Sorry. Wishmaster is Wes Craven.
Oh,
That's
okay.
that's the horror master attached to that one.
Gotcha.
Sorry, just to get that correct.
That makes sense
But
with
sorry,
the
keep
double
going.
W. The skinless woman who like smokes the cigarette after killing the guy, and then the oxygen kill. I think her name's Lisa. I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. She was floating around Twitter a long time in the beginning of May as like who you think is the villain, who's actually the villain, and I'm just like, yeah, the lore of her character.
Yeah.
I gotta rewatch those freaking movies.
Yeah.
So
that first one is like classic. Like it is some good classic gross horror, body horror, like goodness. You know, it's up there with like Videodrome for me and shit like that.
yeah, it's one of those movies I saw too young. That's what Hellraiser is for me.
Yeah,
and I still dug it, but like Critters is the epitome of that. I saw Critters 3 is the one with the balls, right? Of Critters.
Yeah.
And that
I think Critters 3 I think is the one Zach would actually not weirdly, but I mean like Critters is one of the series that he adores. And I think he'd be strangling us right now because we're probably getting this all wrong. But I'm pretty sure 3 is the one with the balls because that's the one with the guy with the bunny kill suit, right? Where they get like inside the bunny suit.
I honestly, I saw it way too young and it freaked me to frick out. And then I watched Critters again. I'm like, I don't know why this bothered me as a child. And then like what's worse, it was on like Sci-Fi or something like that. So it was also edited, but it was just on cable flipping through. I saw this and I was like interested. And then I watched them like roll over a dude. And then I'm like, well, that
After
affected me.
so after E.T., right, there was this like rash of just quick to market, cheaply made little creature films, right? Mac and Me is a great example of this. The one in my house that we like all kind of weirdly fell in love with was Norm the Gnome. I do remember that one.
I know
Where
the
he,
cover. I've never seen it.
oh man, and he just like he likes pizza and arcades. I don't remember much else about
Oh,
that.
he
But
sounds
like we
cool.
also in the same realm, we saw things like Ghoulies and Critters and shit like that too, right? Like that's like we my brother and I like latched onto just like renting these kinds of weird ass any movie that had either a little person in a costume or a puppet or some combination of the two like was catnip for us. Like if we could watch one of those movies, and that is when I saw Critters, and to that point, like that was around the same time in my life where I was seeing things like Hellraiser, Alien for the first time.
Yeah.
Like I saw Terminator 2 way too many times before I ever saw Terminator, that kind of thing.
I never saw Terminator 2 until Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines was coming out.
Oh
That was
man,
the first
Terminator
time I
2 is
saw it.
like the Terminator
I
movie.
know, which is crazy, but I had
It's
seen
like the definitive.
Terminator like hundreds of times. And I think it comes down to the fact that like that's the one my father preferred, which makes sense in a lot of ways. I don't know. That's the one I said. I see Terminator a bunch of times, and then when Rise of the Machines, I'm like, oh, I guess it's time to finally see Terminator 2. So
Yeah,
some good
T2
came
is
out
like
of
the
it.
D2. Yeah, it's weird. T2 is one of those ones. It's the James Cameron sequel special where it becomes kind of the definitive film in the series. Is T2's and his whole like touch of Cameron to that one. The other one famously being Aliens.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, at least
but
he did the first one. Like Aliens is really what you're talking about, where like he comes in and adds that James Cameronness. It's weird how
Sure.
Terminator goes to Terminator 2, and it's him who made both of those movies.
Well, because Terminator 2 is him off the fucking leash.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, he
that's
can do
that's
whatever he
what the
wants.
secret is, and
Yeah.
it's why and that is the kind of filmmaker Cameron has become to this day, right? And here we are to talk about Avatar. No, that's not happening today. But exactly that, right? When you start to see that Cameron is the one really truly driving the bus is stuff like Terminator 2, and then so you get to really see a lot more of him on screen, and I think it's why it becomes the more definitive film for people when they talk about his oeuvre of work. Is Terminator 2 is his kind of his one of his early opuses, right? Is because it is so much just him on screen because of the success of Terminator. He's given that ability.
Oh yeah, definitely. Plus, it was one of those movies that, even though it's not a kid-friendly movie, it's a lot of parents took their kids to see it, and having John Connor as a teenager in that film, like you kind of have that audience XP in the film who doesn't really understand what's going on. Weirdly, it makes Terminator feel more like a prequel than the first movie, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah, but it's just one of those ones that I'd never seen. I'd never seen the movie, which is crazy because there are so many references to that movie in pop culture that went right over my friggin' head. Like Wayne's
How
World
did you
2.
ever laugh at Wayne's World?
Exactly.
How did you ever laugh at Wayne's World, man?
I'm just like, why is he yelling about this guy? And then I'm like, oh, because he's the bad guy from T2. Spoilers for Wayne's World 2. And maybe T2, but we didn't say Robert Patrick, so you might have no idea who we're talking about. Oh, wait, I just ruined that. But yes, no, feeling good. I'm feeling good. It was nice to be relaxed, and I even booked my next cleaning a year in advance to make sure that I could have another moment to just sort of separate my mind from my body to recuperate after next year's Brendan Fraser History Month.
I'm glad that you started to use this show as a calendar app. I'm really proud of that.
Well, it was great because she's like, well, we can book your appointment in December. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Can I also book the earliest that you have available in June? And it really was, she's like, this really was therapeutic for you? And I'm like, yeah. And dentists kind of give you a weird look. Not necessarily Bill Murray in Little Shop of Horrors, because like it's not that I love the pain. It's just one of those moments where I have learned to disassociate my mind from my body. And for a guy whose mind is kind of always going, that's a nice
Hey man,
moment.
you know, it's 2023. We got to find pleasure anywhere we can get it.
That's all right.
We need
So
to find joy and happiness anywhere we can find it, man.
all right, we're 15 minutes into the episode. What
And
are
my
some
nihilism is already starting to show a
No,
little
not
bit.
that. Your nihilism is one of the cornerstones of the show, Sejohn. But I said I was going to make a list of things we missed from May while we were celebrating Brendan Fraser. I never
Let's
really
do it.
did that, but like,
Oh,
what,
never
like,
mind.
I'm going to be honest about it, right?
Shit.
Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I think, is the place to. No, I mean, the place to start is probably. We're still immersed in the writer's strike. How often do you hear about it? Is going to be my first question to you.
Not as much as a few weeks ago, but it still pops up from time to time, mostly just because of things like Reddit and stuff like that. And the certain circles that I'm in, it just keeps kind of more than anything. The big thing that keeps coming up is the ways in which fucking larger companies keep shooting themselves in the damn foot with it. All this shit with like what happened on Max, where they like uncredited a whole bunch of people or some shit.
Well, I mean, the Max issue was Zaslav's big move, and nobody like noticed it until it was too late. And then, honestly, I'm surprised that they walked it back as quickly as they did, because
that Warner Brothers like HBO did like
that
Max,
time, yeah,
the
or
fuck,
AOL Time Warner, yeah,
whatever.
I think it's Time Warner. Now it's
Right.
Discovery Time Warner, right?
So all right, so quick breakdown of what happened, just because some people might have missed it, because they did walk it back so fast and they had kind of done it so under the radar. But essentially, they had taken the titles away from basically everybody and gave everybody the title of creator. And then like where was this even posted? Because like this was apparently a decision that they were making, that anyone creating anything for them was going to be like evened out into this weird. I don't know what they were hoping to achieve. I don't know what they thought they were getting away with. I don't know why they thought they could do this. It's the wildest fucking thing. But it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, is that the companies just keep kind of fucking stumbling over themselves in this whole thing, trying to like one up the unions, and it's just not working. Because this move to like make everybody the same level, of course, then pissed off not just the writers, but then also all the other unions, SAG and DAG and all this other shit, like got involved, because they were just like, wait a minute now, like you were poking at the writers, but now you're fucking with the actors and the directors and the EPs and everything. Like everybody was just like, what the hell was this? I don't know what they thought they were accomplishing by making by this move of labeling everybody creators. And again, I don't know where it even like showed, because there's no way that like credits were going to roll on a TV show and just everybody was just going to be credited as created by, right?
Right, yeah. So what it looked like, based on the language that I saw, is, you know how every time you buy anything or you open anything, you start up a video game or anything, you start your iPod up, your iPhone, your Samsung Galaxy, there are terms and conditions that you're supposed to read and then agree to. It literally feels like they tried to slip it into a terms and conditions agreement. Now, it was a contract. It was a contractual change. But the way that they did it was, in going from HBO Max to Max, you're home for HBO. Which, what the hell? Like, come on. You still have to mention HBO. Why are you even changing the name? The reason
it completely also fucks the entire motto of HBO. Like, it's not TV, it's HBO. No, wait, it's not HBO anymore either.
It's not HBO. Max. It's Max. I don't know. I just hope Peacock follows suit. But anywho, Jay would just be cock. Yes, that was the joke. Thank you for catching it. No, but so in the shift from that, all of the contracts switched over to the new contract with Max from HBO Max. And it was hidden in the compensatory section of the contract that everybody is now a creator. And the way that they do that is, they're not going to switch everybody's credit. Any credit under this list of titles is now deemed a creator, and this is the creator pay scale. So directors are now creators. Actors are now creators. Writers are now creators. And rather than the director getting X amount of dollars, and it's on the back end, it's not on the front end, it's through the streaming agreement with Max to air the programming, the residuals that you're getting, the compensation for the replay of that, you're now getting creator credit, which is much lower
Okay.
than anything else.
Right. Well, so they're trying to weirdly go the YouTube model
Yeah.
route then. What you're describing is that to a fucking T. Twitch too, to a point. But that idea being that it's all about what happens to your video from here on out. What like that creator title is going to mean. What the man?
What your
That's so weird
compensation
though
is. Yeah.
because it ties the success of this shit now to the streaming service, but that's not the way that anybody looks at these products, movies, television shows, as whether or not as whether or not they're successful. Like that's just not the way that people have measured them. Mostly because these streaming services have not been very vocal about what their numbers are, right? And then add to that gives HBO, Time Warner, like the ability to, at a moment's notice, as we've seen them already do in this past year, pull your shit if your residuals are tied to tied to the streaming service part, not to the like the home market, not to like reshowings in theaters because your movie does really well and hey, Sony wants to add 10 minutes to it, so let's put it back in theaters. No, sorry, you're not going to get paid for this part because this isn't part of the streaming service. And as you see, as a creator, you don't get anything unless it's on the app, right? Like fuck all of that because that's exactly what YouTube's doing to a whole bunch of people right now. And people are leaving YouTube left, right, and center because they feel like the ways that YouTube is screwing creators, like specifically using that title, that like the ways that they feel they're getting screwed by that title and the contracts associated with it, they don't want to work with YouTube anymore. And they're losing like huge numbers. Why would that be what they would want to aim for?
So I guess I don't know. I mean, it works because they're in the hole. They're still in the hole, even with everything that they've like broken down to try to get liquidity to start paying off the like billions of dollars in debt that are associated with the purchase of Time Warner from AOL by Discovery. Yeah. Like they're still not doing well. So by doing that, they get to keep more money in their coffers, and the compensation goes down. It was basically putting up a firewall between the original contracts and the contracts now that you're on our streaming service. And I guess there has to have been something that they sold the lawyers on for like why that would be worthwhile. Like
I mean, the only thing I can think of, and this is such a far left field thing that I'm sure there's a million other reasons, but the one most obvious one I can think of is that they're planning to go to an ad-supported model soon. And a large part of trying to figure out how to do that with some of this work, because they've got so many like Max originals and shit like that, is how do you slot commercials into this stuff, into the contracts for these shows, where basically they're going to have a new ad revenue to them, and people don't have that in their contracts. They're gonna say something about that. And so this seems like them trying to cut that off at the head by already labeling them creators and already building in some of those types of contract like levels, so that when they do introduce ad supported stuff later, they've already got a way to slot in what their residuals will be for those kinds of ads. Because if you're on as a creator on this thing and like your contract is tight and you're detrimental to the product and all that, you're going to get a higher residual from the ad revenues from us putting this ads on your shit. It sounds like that's what they were looking at, is that they were trying to figure out how can we start getting more closer to an ad-supported model and not fuck these major contracts with huge movie companies. And that, basically we're about to start screwing with the kinds of people that have money to screw us right back, which is not what happens with things like YouTube or even to that point, when they're doing shit against their users, right? Like part of the reason that so many people kind of put up with so much bullshit is that nobody has the time or money to go to court for anything, right? That's not true of some of these movie studios and actors and directors and writers. Like some of them are in pretty cushy positions to do exactly that. And so this seemed like them trying to really trying to head off some later down the line stuff that they really want to do with Max, that I don't know how they're going to be able to do it without this kind of language in the contracts. But you don't just change contract language just without telling anybody. Like it's just the wildest move I've seen anybody make in this whole thing.
Which, yeah, so there has to have been some negotiation, and I think that the lawyers, the way that they sold it, exactly what you just said. You say, well, by making them creators, they're then going to be able to get from this pot of ad revenue once the ads start being put in front of products that previously did not have ads as part of them. So like that sounds good, right? It sounds like another revenue stream. But then if you actually read it, and it's the fact that like, but everybody's a creator. So the guy who appeared in this episode of Cheers, who's going to get 78 cents every time that the episode is watched, is also the director gets 78 cents, when before they were getting better compensation because they directed it. So like that's the thing. And by using the creator language, you get to subvert all of the other union issues that we're seeing. But I don't think that this change, this creator change, was reactionary to the writers' strike, the writers actually going on strike. I believe that it was probably preemptive because we are in this mom, dad, grad gift corridor of contract negotiations from the WGA, SAG-AFTRA, and then the DGA.
Yeah.
That like, okay, if we can get ahead of it and then roll it out on the 23rd, they'll be so busy negotiating that they'll just agree to it. And literally that's what happened. Like they're like, this is good for us. We're going to get more revenue from Max once it switches over. We'll sign off on the contract. And then somebody was just reading it and realized, well, we're all going to get something, but we're all going to get the same piece of the pie. The amount of work we put in is no longer going to be relevant.
Yeah, the levels at which we do work, and you know, like part of the whole thing is that part of that whole complaint also is that any business needs to have a structure. I need to know who I answer to. I need to know who that person answers to. I need to know who the person I'm working with on this project answers to if it's not the same people, and in that relationship, who's got the power and all that. Because when decisions have to get made and rubber needs to hit the road, everybody needs to know like who's going to drive the car, right? Like there needs to be a structure to businesses. Even these businesses out there that try and limit the power of that structure so that people are not getting screwed. There's tons of businesses out there that are trying that sort of stuff, like everybody gets paid the same, or you know, nobody has a job title that overlaps other job titles. But they still need to have these conversations to figure out how the system works. And this isn't a conversation. Like a contract's not a conversation. Like it is. This is them just saying everybody's just the same level, and it becomes like, well, then none of us are. Like, why would we do that, right? Like, why? Like, we need to know that the work we're doing is valued, and this does not show value. But you know, like the big like real life example that this would be countering would be what happened with Scarlett Johansson and Black Widow, right? Like this is all speculation on our part, right? Like we're not experts or nor have we like
neither of us have been to law school
but,
at
like,
all.
This feels like a direct response to that kind of shit. Where when Disney shifted all of their stuff to streaming during COVID, one of the big moves was Black Widow, and it did it so exceptionally well. And because of Scarlett Johansson's contract, she was not supposed to see any extra residuals from the streaming side of things, because all of her shit was wrapped up in when this movie comes out in theaters, when this movie comes out on DVD, when this movie, you know, like when the toys sell, all of the other stuff that normally goes along with that was upended by stuff like COVID. And Disney just completely dropped the fucking ball, that rather than renegotiate their contracts with one of their biggest stars at the time on one of their biggest franchises, they just decided to see what would happen if they didn't. And they learned that lesson the wrong way, right?
And they also might have learned the wrong lesson there. The fact that, like, Scarlett, like, we still have Florence Pugh to pick up the Black Widow character. Like, Scarlett Johansson, by all accounts, to the world, was done, right? Her character, spoilers for Endgame, passes away in Endgame. They do a Black Widow movie. Frankly, a whole phase too late. Right?
I mean, two or three phases too late, but yes, go ahead.
Like, 2 phases too late. For it to kick off phase 4 is crazy. It should have been in phase 2 or the first movie of phase 3. That's not something you do posthumously for the character. But then that happens, and they're like, okay, so we made the money, and we'll see what happens with this. We'll see how we can use characters this way. Like, it feels a little bit like Disney was trying to test the waters, and we were kind of gifted this opportunity to see what will happen. And like what ultimately did that lose them as a company, right? That their connection to that.
No, they learned that they needed to. Yeah, they learned that they needed to reconsider contracts with streaming in mind, and it really has led to a lot of streaming focus on a lot of their material. And Disney is still trying to figure shit out, but that is exactly the public face of that problem, right? Is what happened with Scarlett Johansson suing Disney for money because streaming wasn't considered part of her contract, but here it was only on streaming and like like not really only on streaming because I saw it in theaters, but like
Yeah. So
doing
that.
more of its business on streaming, and like that was kind of a big issue for people involved in the making of that movie. And this feels like the kind of a reaction to that. Not the only reaction, but a reaction to that is Max, 5 years down the line saying, well, in that case, let's make everybody a creator. Like, I guess it's sounding more and more like it was an additional credit to their credit on the work itself. Let's give everybody an additional credit of creators so that A, B, and C can happen. But like, that's not how. Again, this is the craziest thing about this is that this is just not how contracts work. This is just not. This is like say what you want about like lawyers on either side agreeing to A, B, or C. In the end, like this was done in a way that was inappropriate, which is why they reversed it as fast as they did. Is because they got caught doing something that you really should not be doing at a time when they really shouldn't be fucking around. Like
Yeah.
with everything going on with the strike, whether or not they planned it to be at the time of a strike going on or not, like they really should have at some point stepped in and said, we're not going to do this, like scrub this part that we like, and they didn't, and they got screwed.
Yeah.
And that's just been, and I think that kind of more to the like lends more to the whole point of the writers, like, is that like this is the way that these people behave. They don't think about business as a business, as like a arts creating business. They're looking at their business as just a money pot, and how many ways can they get money out of it, and it's killing like the drive of all of these people to want to be involved in this process, and that sucks. Because like we're talking about the people that that entertain us, and that entertainment can be anything from educational entertainment that brings us up to speed with the way of the world, or escapism, like, and everything in between. And like the idea that anybody out there would want to fuck with that is just always been beyond me. But this is not the first writer's strike we've experienced in our life. This is not the first creative strike that we've experienced in our lives, and it surely won't be the last. I can't believe
Well,
that
it
it's still
might be
going
the
on.
last if they end up not giving into their demands. And how can computers strike, or do computers just, eliminate all the humans?
Well, see, but this is the stuff, the other thing in the background of all of this, right? So this all kind of got kicked off with the AI stuff, right? It's not the only complaint. I think we should make sure that we're clear about that before we go any further, because a lot of what we've been hearing about has been the AI stuff, but that's also not the only thing in all of these negotiations that the writers have had issues with. But it's again a prime example of the idea that the business doesn't give a shit about the artistic, creative side of it. It just wants a product at the end that it can sell, and if it sees that it can create a product with AI, why wouldn't it try and use it? And the answer is going to be that we're learning that AI, you need somebody that can still use the AI. Like you're not eliminating a person in that scenario. It's crazy how many people talk about AI like it's going to replace a person, but not mentioning the fact that AI is going to have to come along with somebody with it to like get shit out of it. AI doesn't just magically just produce, at least not yet. We're not there, right? Like there needs to be somebody that's really good at structuring what comes out of it. You're going to need editors still once it comes out to actually fix it. So I mean, at some point, you're still talking about employing a bunch of people. It's just that all they're doing is you're shifting the focus of their job from creating a piece of material to just cleaning up a piece of material, which is a whole like part of the industry already. Like it's there's this really interesting kind of idea that AI is going to come in and just we're never going to have a human in the building again, and that's just not the way it's going to work for anybody. And so, and I think executives have convinced themselves it is, which is why they're leaning so much into it. And I think that the scary like ignorance of that concept is really what pisses off a lot of people, even people that are pro AI are still like, you guys can't ask too much of this shit, because that's what killed stuff like VR back in the day. That's what killed AR, is like people expecting way too much from this product too fast, and when it didn't deliver that exact thing, people stopped investing their time and money in it. And they're like, don't do that, because at this point, like, we can't stop this ball a rolling, so we need to make sure that we're still paying attention and investing, but we need to be aware of what the actual limitations of this shit is. Yeah, the AI stuff, I do think that we will still see strikes in the future, because you're going to have people like prompt writers who are going to be able to go on strike.
Right. I guess where I'm coming from, though, because the other side of the AI, you're not right. AI cannot work on its own. But a writer room that used to be 10 people, right? And that's just an example I pulled from the air. There's no reason backing it. But let's say a 10-person writer room with the inclusion of a tool like AI could get pared down to like 2 to 4 people. So that's
Yes,
six people without work.
it could get down to 2 to 4 people, and then what that thing will be able to produce will be able to produce 13 to 23 episodes of a television show for a season, and that's great. The problem is going to come from these kinds of executives and higher ups that are willing to fire 8 people and keep 2 on in order to still get the same amount of product. Are going to say, now on the other hand, if we kept all 10 on and then upped the number of shifts we did and say we had an episode a week, because we're not putting a bunch of people through crunch, we're putting the AI through crunch at this point. So everybody seems to think that we're going to keep the same output of product and then put less money behind making it, and that will happen in certain cases. But we're also not acknowledging that what's going to happen on the other side of this coin is going to be that we're also going to push this shit further than we push humans, because it's a computer and we always do that. And once we do that, we're going to require more people on the back end to keep up.
Yes.
Right? So like there is some conversation to be had there about what that looks like too. I think for the record, I think both instances suck. I think that I am always going to be a proponent of watching those, we're going to end up with these like craft television shows, craft movies, like we do with beer and alcohols nowadays, where it's like, we didn't let a robot touch this was all human hands that made this product. And people are going to talk about like, oh, you can really tell, and there's going to be those people that get caught in scandals because they talk about how it's a purely human generated film, and somebody's going to find out that's like the accounting office has an AI running in it, and people are going to lose their shit, like that. We're going to hear those kinds of stories too. Like there's going to be a shift in the ways in which creative work exists now. There already has been. There's already all of this shit out there about like, kids writing full theses with AI and getting degrees, and what does that mean, and all this other stuff. The world has fundamentally changed by AI already, and will definitely change. But there is so much focus on maintaining status quo and using AI to do that, and how that's going to affect like the ways we all kind of live. And in that conversation, openly acknowledging that it's going to upend the status quo, but that also means the product output is going to be upended as well. Like we can't just like we can't do this one to one. We literally don't know what the end goal of an AI like system in entertainment really looks like right now. You think there's too many Marvel movies now. You get AI writing them. We could get 6 a year, right? People could be, I mean, like the dream, like this is I'm putting quotes around that because like I know that this is a horror show for some people, like a nightmare, but the dream is like generating your own entertainment, right? Being able to go to a Disney owned and operated website, put in a couple of keywords about the movie you want to see. I want to see Iron Man and Woody ride off into the sunset together. My version of Toy Story doesn't have Buzz Lightyear. Like okay, and then boom, here it is in front of you. You get the entirety of this film, only now we've replaced every scene of Buzz Lightyear with just like Mach 3 Iron Man. Okay, cool. Then you don't even have to depend on an editor or anybody out there. This system just puts this together, spits it out to me. I enjoy my shit, and we all go about our day. And like, again, that's a nightmare for people, because like there is no director involved in that. There's no writer involved in that and all that shit. But from the business end, like, it's great. They don't have this product, blah, blah, blah. But what that also ignores is there's a ton of infrastructure that needs to be in place for that to work. Like, somebody needs to maintain a server farm somewhere for all of this. We need to be able to put together what happens when I ask for Iron Man to be in my shit, and somehow I end up with fucking Robert Downey Jr. from U.S. Marshals in there instead. Like, what happened there? Like we need to.
Did you read my dream journal? Because, oh my God, if it were Robert Downey Jr. from U.S. Marshals as Tony Stark, that's my heaven, Sejohn. That's my heaven.
It's just like this idea that there's never going to be a need for human oversight. I think we're I don't think that's ever going to be true. I think we're always going to need human oversight. Human oversight, though, does not guarantee everybody a job in this system. Totally get that. But then there's also going to be these artisans out there that demand that their shit not be touched by AI. There's always going to be room for people to create, and I think that that's one of the big things that these executives are ignoring. It's one of the biggest reasons why I'm all for this strike is because this is a bunch of creatives pointing out, look, we are not being respected for the work we create, and it's been slowly going downhill for years. AI is kind of the final nail in that coffin for us and has caused us to speak out because this is truly showing you how they value us. They think we are no better than a hack machine that can come in and just not a hacked machine, but a hack of a machine,
Yeah, no,
and like come in and like and just spit out bullshit and like suddenly like they've got 23 episodes for a TV show, and yeah, it's a little off. People are saying things not right in the right way that they normally would, and characters are behaving a little weirdly here or there, but you'll put up with it because the audience, you'll put up with anything really in the end. And it's just like, what do you think of us? Like, what do you think of your creatives? What do you think of your audience if you think this is an okay product to be putting out there?
I mean, yeah, and what I was bringing up is because a lot of the things that they're pointing out about the writers' demands, the way that they're couching it, the way that they're using propaganda to sort of make them look like they're entitled, is by saying they want 10 people in a room and maybe only 4 of them are doing the work. And it's like, yeah, but that's not what they're just making sure that jobs are guaranteed in your utopia where a computer's doing all of the work. That you can't just eliminate these people because you say, well, they're no longer necessary. They want to make sure that there's a human element there still.
Yeah. This is the problem with the arts in general throughout history, especially in this country, and the ways in which people think that when people equate jobs, like if you're getting paid for 40 hours a week in a writer's room versus 40 hours a week, say, like answering phone calls for a construction tech company out in the middle of fucking Utah, right? Let's just pick a job out of the air, right? that I have no relation to in any way, right? When I am done with my job at 5 o'clock out in Utah answering phones, I turn off my phone and I go hang out with my family, and I am not at work. And there's this running issue in the arts that's just not what happens. Like 40 hours a week, you hit that 5 o'clock hour and you walk out that door, your brain is still putting shit together. You may still be like jotting shit down or creating and like writing and stuff like that. And there's plenty of jobs that are like this. Like the 9 to 5 doesn't make sense because of the ways in which that works. And there are going to be some weeks where a lot of that work doesn't really come because you're having a block of some kind, or there's shit going on in your life, or you can't be at work because you're sick that day. Whatever reason, you're not putting that 40 hours in that week. But there's always those weeks where you're putting in 60 to 80 hours too. And it all kind of balances out. And the problem that the arts has always had is trying to explain to people that yes, you do see your artists sitting at home in the middle of the day, like cutting their grass when everybody's at work and all that kind of shit. Like, but that's because they're the kind of work that they're doing and when they're doing work and how they're doing work is not equivalent to the ways that other people do work. So this bullshit that like there's 10 people in a room and it looks like only 4 of them are actually writing today is like, fuck you. Like that's, I'm sorry that that's what it looks like to you, but that's not how the system works, right? Like I currently work for a small arts program, and we have a 9 to 2 open office. Like that is when people can come by to see stuff, right? And we have had issues with higher ups at involved that have said things just like, I mean, you guys only work 25 hours a week, and it's like, no, we don't. Just because the office closes at 2 does not mean we've stopped working. First of all, there's plenty of us that stick around after the office closes. That's just bluntly just like one of the most obvious things about it. Secondly, there's a whole bunch of shit that goes on at night. So like we work 9 to 2 in the office, but then we're there for like for shows and movies and all this shit at night. We're there for an extra 15 to 20 hours a week. So like some weeks we're working 45 to 50 hours. And like they're getting people to understand that just because it doesn't fit into a normal structure of what they think work is, like quote unquote work is, does not mean that work's not happening, does not mean that effort is not being put in, that talent is not being, pressed in some way. So like I hate those kinds of arguments of just like we you know you ask for they're so privileged they want to guarantee jobs for 10 people when it really it only takes 4 or 5 to get an episode written. And it's like, yeah, but then the other 4 or 5 people can be working on next week's episode, can be working on a spin-off series that you somehow want, can be working on the product design. Like there's so many reasons why there might be 10 people in that room.
Yeah, those 6 people who doesn't look like they're doing anything, they're the ones who wrote the stuff that those 4 people are working on right now. So they have to be in the room to answer questions or to hear that feedback.
Yeah, or maybe one of them is like a timeline expert, which is like a huge thing that's been a part of television for a while now, especially since since the era of like The Office and stuff, when we started doing a lot more improv on set. Like you might literally have to pay somebody, and sorry, they may not be on the ball, they may not be working 40 hours a week, but their job is a pretty like important job to the whole program, where their whole thing is that they just sit around while people improvise, and if somebody says something that is technically out of timeline for what is in the episode, like it's their job to say, nah, you can't talk about that because technically Jim wouldn't know that Dwight did this shit yet, so like you can't talk about that yet. So like again, it may not look like they're doing much. They're literally sitting in a chair while 2 people act in front of them, and every 20 to 30 minutes they speak up and say like, "Oh, you might want to, rethink that punchline." And like that doesn't look like much, but at the end of the day, if you watch The Office and it was just a bunch of random ass jokes that were all out of time and context, it wouldn't be The fucking Office, would it? It would be Family Guy. But like
I don't know why we gotta burn Family Guy down to raise up The Office, but yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. It's just been a wild time. It really has been a wild time. But I've been saying this since the beginning. I haven't said it yet on the show. It also feels kind of like the worst possible time for them to have gone on strike, because I don't know if the pocketbooks of the executives are feeling the hit when most seasons of television were over by the time the writer strike started.
I guess, but as somebody that has not watched cable TV in the last 10 years, like that timeline doesn't matter to me. Like the fact that there are writers on strike right now, and I'm thinking of 3 or 4 different shows in production at streaming services that are currently not happening because of this sort of shit, like that is affecting me and really making me reconsider where I put my money. I mean, we had a long conversation this week, like off mic, about how I don't think I'm going to continue with Max. Like right now, the only reason I'm still watching HBO Max currently is what's going on with like West Wing that I kind of got into before the whole switchover. And I've come to the realization that like I kind of want to own West Wing. It's good enough. It's like good enough. It is a historically like important show in the whole like just oeuvre of television, and it has a cachet to it that I think I'm still going to enjoy years from now, right? There's plenty of reason for me to just fucking buy it. So at that point, I don't know if there's any reason for me to keep Max, because like all of this shit has just pissed me off. Between the switch over to them becoming Max, the ways that Zaslav and all of this shit have treated creatives for months, not just the writer's strike, but I mean all of the shit that happened with Batgirl and all of the shows that they canceled, Close Enough and Infinity Train and being just like pulled from history, right? Like that kind of stuff just it has really made me think about where my money is, and that money is in a streaming service that I'm pretty sure within the next month I'm going to cancel. And so like I appreciate what you're saying in like in the historic timeline of like summer season, right? Television shows have ended. The movies that are set to come out are all these big blockbuster money making ones. So it's not going to look like movies are being affected for months, right? Like you're just not going to see this is going to be much more effective of when it comes to the awards season at the end of the year. But there's already such a niche audience for those kinds of movies that the idea that there might be a couple of less of them or 1 or 2 of them might get pushed to next year isn't going to affect the same people that say the next Transformers movie coming out in a few months is, like that one
it comes out on Friday, just right, for that. Yeah, like I can't. I was surprised when it's like, oh, Transformers comes out on Friday.
I thought they were going to aim for the 4th of July again, but
nope.
Maybe
June 9th of like all the things. And
maybe they're hoping for the 4th of July. They
got a little groundswell. I don't.
And yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if I mentioned it in the Discord. I went to go see Across the Spider-Verse on Friday. I didn't think I was going to, but I had the dental appointment, so I was going to be home anyway. So I'm like, I'll book a ticket. I'll see how I'm feeling around the time the movie comes. But then on Thursday, I finally rewatched Into the Spider-Verse. And historically, I think we talked about it on an episode. One of the worst experiences in a theater was my viewing of Into the Spider-Verse the first time. Like, to the fact that apparently the defense mechanism that my mind activated was, let's just blank this from your mind. Like, I did not remember anything about that movie before rewatching it. It's a friggin' delight. It's an excellent film. And so I'm like, well, if I'm up to it, if I'm out of the dentist on time and everything, I'm going to go see the movie. So I go see the movie, and they say that it's going to be 3 hours long on the website, right? So that's including like trailers and all the other stuff, right? The movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes long. It is currently the longest piece of animated entertainment ever produced by an American studio, which is very interesting, like when you consider that. But so it gets out at that time, and I don't have a car right now. I've mentioned it, that I'm like borrowing rides, and nobody wanted me to let me leave a car at the movie theater for 3 hours. So I was dropped off. But then I was waiting for my ride, just sitting in the lobby of the movie theater, and a district manager and the manager of the theater were having a conversation in like the little lounge area, like near the bar. And they were not regulating the volume of their voices at all, said Devin Decker. And they were talking about, I'm going to say, pretty inside baseball stuff. Like how many tickets they need to sell a week in order to justify their current compensation plan and the amount of employees that they staff. And the fact that like that number's around 6,000 tickets need to be sold per week. And we're not even hitting that. We've been dead all year until the Mario movie hit. Thank God for the Mario movie. But then, like, that was starting to die down. And the way that the theaters have structured Spider-Man into Transformers into The Flash, all of those movies are only going to get a week. They're cannibalizing their comebacks and their second weekends by, like, stacking them. So these two guys are like, this theater might not be open at the end of the summer, despite all of the movies that we have coming out.
I mean, I don't think it was like a secret, but like theaters were already running on a fucking thread, like before the pandemic, right? The idea that like movie theaters, you know, it's the old kind of conversation that I'm sure we all have heard, that the reason why candy and soda cost so fucking much is because that's where they're making all their money, right? And how many people out there nowadays like buy concessions that don't just bring shit with them, right? And you know, like I'm guilty of that. Like I can't afford to be spending an extra $20 at the movie theater for just popcorn and soda, like when I can just sneak in a candy bar with me and I'll be fine. Like there's no justification for me to do that. But like it is true that they are running it at basically a loss on ticket sales, with the hope that concessions will keep shit afloat, and that system wasn't working even before all of this shit scared people from ever going back to the theater again. We had a lot of conversations throughout COVID about how they were really going to need to rethink the theater system, the theatrical release system, because we knew this was going to happen, and we weren't the only ones talking about this. People have been talking about this again for years, like this idea that theaters could not continue to operate the way they did pre-COVID, and they definitely cannot afford to do it post-COVID. But nothing changed. They didn't change anything about the ways that like you would have thought there would have been somebody out there that would have said, hey, how about we change this imbalance issue in the ticketing system so that we can get a little bit more money. We don't have to worry about pushing movies as hard as we have to push them, because you know, anybody wants to know why we have to lean on first weekend success of films to like keep shit going, is because the entire system is built on that. And if that doesn't happen, the entire house of cards falls apart, right? Like we need movies to do $1 billion, and it needs to be in their first like week, 2 weeks maybe, because if not, then we can't afford to keep movies like coming out. Not because of anything other than the studio system, the systemic greed in the studio system, keeping that shit going. If they could just accept that maybe a movie's not going to be $1 billion success and give theaters a little bit more of that cash to play with, like we would not be having these, we wouldn't be overhearing these conversations of these guys like lamenting the loss of their entire like career.
Yeah, it was one of those things where like when I stepped outside, I had a mini panic attack because it felt like just overhearing that a patient is going to die. And like, even if you don't know that patient, like just hearing two doctors talk about, yeah, there's really nothing we can do, right? We're going to like, there's some quality of life things we can do, but who knows what's going to happen after that. And it's like, oh my God, like it was terrifying, especially when all of the propaganda around it is that like movie theaters are back. And it's like, no, they're not. No, they're really not.
No, they're not.
And it,
I mean, it's the same. It's just another arm of the whole COVID's over bullshit
Yeah.
that we know is not true, right? Is all of this stuff that everybody's just like things are back to normal, and then there's like everything is on fire around them, and it's just like what are we doing? What are we doing?
one interesting thing, I don't have a lot to say about GDQ for this past GDQ that ran, but
Yeah.
I was watching last night with my mother because I was waiting to go pick Dale up from something, and it was just like something to have on in the background that could keep me awake. And my mother made note of the fact that like it's really nice that like everybody has masks on, and this is the last day of the event. The first day of the event, not everybody had masks on. So you have to wonder, did something happen that made it so now everybody has to have a mask on?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's the thought. Especially they're raising money for Doctors Without Borders, right? And one of the women from that organization, when she did her interview, did not have a mask on, right? So
Yeah.
if she were wearing a mask, it'd be like, oh, okay, so masks are required for this event. That like conversation took place on Wednesday, and then Saturday night, there's not a person without a mask. It was just like, huh, that's interesting. And also in my own life, like the number of cases that I've heard about, it like I thought I was even starting to go into the whole COVID is over, everything is fine. But then like when other people at my job, like managers and things, have it, and also nobody is told about it, right? There's no thing that like they're going to be out sick for this time or anything like that. The secrecy of it, like we don't want to say the word COVID. Honestly, the fact that we've said the word as many times as we had, I think YouTube would have the right to delist our video for using the terminology based on their like structural stuff. Whatever. Like, it's strange. Like, if I had just been told that the person I've been trying to get in touch with was out sick with COVID, I would have understood. But finding out, like, Friday after them not responding to me for 2 weeks, that made me feel more nervous about the situation. Like, what are you not telling me?
Yeah, I know. There's going to be low level paranoia, I think, in the water for a while for a lot of people. As a people, like we're just going to experience that. But yeah, I mean, and that kind of shit is what feeds all of this stuff, right? All going back to the strike, like all of this stuff about like theaters like still not being on their feet, and like there still being this understanding that at any moment a movie can be shut down because if somebody gets COVID on set and like everybody needs to mask up and go home for 7 days, like that can be hugely detrimental to productions, you know. Like there's still all of this stuff out there, and nothing has been done to make sure that the writers are not going to get screwed when all is said and done. And you know, as I said, they've been joined now by things like the Directors Guild and the Screen Actors Guild and stuff like that because of all these other fucking stupid moves that have gone on throughout this whole process. And so, you know, they're not alone, and they're not quiet still. Like they're definitely out there. I just think that we're not getting the same kind of blitz that we were when this whole thing first started.
Yeah, I think that the coverage has waned, and I just hope that it doesn't go away. Because, like, and I don't know, everything I hear I'm taking with a grain of salt. But the fact that after July, there is the studios will have the option to just start firing the writers who are on strike, like, that's a scary thing to hear. Because what is affected right now? In addition to the fact that most shows are not new right now, right? They usually take a little hiatus in June and in May and June to rest up and prepare for the next season, right? Even find out if there's going to be a next season, right? Like shows are not listed as canceled or renewed until June a lot of the time now, right? So
Right.
are they working? Are they paying those people if they're ultimately not going to do the thing? That whole thing that's there. Even shows like SNL and things that scrapped as soon as the writer's strike happened, they go on hiatus in the summer. It's not like that's new content year round. But then look at all the sporting events that are still going on because of 7-game like series in the NBA and the NHL. Can you remember the last time that the NHL and NBA championships were like trading off days because they were happening concurrently?
Yeah,
I think it was like
yeah,
2013.
I mean, there is
like,
something important to remember about all that, though, is that a lot of those shows, and especially a lot of the commentary shows that go around that shit, have writers that are on strike right now. You know, like there's a lot of writers involved in, especially more the entertainment commentary side of things. But like for a lot of people, especially because of what you're talking about, because there is so much going on, they're not watching individual events. They're waiting to go to those other shows to get their information. And those shows right now are like kind of getting to the end of their like material. You know, like there's writers kind of everywhere. So I think that like one of the things that we may see is a lot more of that stuff, like kind of leaning more on the the cold hard facts. We're not going to get a lot of the really fun commentary stuff from all of these events going on because they don't have writers around to write it for them right now.
well, I mean, the weird thing about sports is that they're technically journalists. That's been something that I've like really dove headfirst into, the difference between a journalist and a writer. Because like that's how, if they lost their morning news programs, I think that NBC, and ABC, NBC, and CBS, they would have been scared, right? That is huge revenue for like over the air television. Is like CBS This Morning, Good Morning America, and the Today Show. Those are huge revenue draws for those. But the fact that all the writers on those shows are technically journalists, so they're in a different guild than the Creative Writers Guild, is like, that's insane to me. Like, it's just this crazy sort of thing where like sports still has the commentary and the jokes, and around the horn is still happening, and pardon the interruption is still happening, because those guys are journalists and they're not technically scabbing by still working because they're not in that union, despite the fact that writing is like the bulk of their job.
Yeah, I am interested to see how this affects that sort of stuff. You know, the big thing that we had last time, the other reason why I feel like you're not seeing huge effects from it immediately, is there was just a much more a larger presence of late night, you know, in general. That was a huge part of that, you know, and we saw at the early days of the writer's strike of this one, guys like Leno getting out there and supporting the writers and stuff like that, which is great because it's what he did last time too, you know, but without that like huge late night like scene like that we had last time, like that, it was one of the first places I remember the Writers Guild, the writers strike when we were in college, that being one of the first places that really got affected. Guys like, you know, like Conan and stuff, like going off air and or doing their own shit, like just them looking into a camera for an hour and that sort of stuff. You know, it just, without that, like that was a huge kind of a canary in a coal mine, I think, last time around, that just doesn't exist anymore. You know,
and it doesn't exist anymore because of the exact creator thing we were talking about.
Right,
Jimmy Fallon and the Tonight Show on NBC, they have gone on at length about how we want to create small consumable bits that will live on YouTube, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter if you watch the show when we're live, because our revenue is going to be generated by YouTube. So when they shuttered, it didn't shutter everything that was on YouTube already.
Right.
And it's years and years of content that can keep people happy and not noticing that they can't watch it at night. But then also, like, while we still have sports and everything like that, these games, they're playing them later because there are no shows to compete against, and it doesn't matter if the NHL championship game goes late because there's not some late night behemoth that we are beholden to the ad sells on that we could risk preempting. So they're putting games on NBC and ABC where you wouldn't normally see them. Like, it's it's this crazy sort of thing where just because of the time of this strike, I feel like the networks are able to insulate themselves from really feeling the crush of it. And that is
Yeah,
the
but
craziest thing to
they're
me.
but
They're going
that's
to
not
feel
gonna
it
last
eventually.
forever.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right. And that's the thing, is that this is all about these writers holding out until they do start to feel that pressure. And you're right, they're not feeling it much right now. At least from the outside looking in, it doesn't look like they're hurting too bad. But I guarantee you that there are people looking at projections for what the rest of the year looks like right now, and those projections are just looking worse and worse every day that this strike is going on. Like there is a section of this of the zeitgeist calendar that is just dedicated to TV shows coming back, to award style movies being out there, award shows that are going to go on, that those all use writers, right? Like to we're gonna see a bunch of AI just giving awards to AI. Like
Yeah. And that'll be fun, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
sort of what we saw anyway, right? But replace AI with members of the Academy. No, just trying to be controversial. I apologize. But yeah, I don't know. And I mean, to that point about projections and everything like that, maybe I've alluded to it, but I think that we stayed pretty Brendan Fraser heavy last month. Wells Fargo saying to Paramount Plus, you should just stop. Like it is not fiscally responsible for you to continue as a service is insanity to me.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that because iCarly season 3 was supposed to premiere near the end of June. And then, stealth drop, it's available on June 1st. I'm logging on to Paramount Plus to watch Beavis and Butthead. And it's like, iCarly's back. And I'm like, what? iCarly's not supposed to be back for weeks. What are you talking about? You're a madman.
Yeah.
And then, nope, it's available now instead of the 22nd. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh.
or Disney doing the whole we're gonna pull a bunch of shows this summer and then a week later doing it. Like not even giving people like time to go and watch their shit before they pull it.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I'm really only upset about like Earth to Ned and Big Shot because I had planned to watch those. But then like Dollface, I didn't realize Dollface was part of it. And that's something I kept saying I'll watch it when I have a moment.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it was yeah, it's a weird, it's man, yeah, like there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're seeing with the streaming stuff that this is what I mean is like they executives seem to think that they understand technology. So that's where like the AI conversation comes from. That's where this whole shift to streaming and streaming rights and contract negotiations based on streaming all like they think that they know how this shit's gonna work because they can figure it out money wise. But what nobody in these conversations seems to be thinking about is like the actual value of it as entertainment or like art. Like that's why shows that people seem to love just are disappearing because like numbers wise it makes more sense to pull this show. Yeah, but maybe for 2 seconds don't think about it from a numbers game. Think about it from the concept of you are Disney and you're putting out entertainment for people to watch and this is a show that people are watching and enjoying. So maybe don't make it like pull it away, And like there's arguments to be made for like are they pulling shows that people aren't watching, right? Because that's always been the thing with like the Netflix conversation is all this shit where people are like they're always canceling my shows 2 seasons into it, but like Reed Hastings has openly said like we only cancel shows that we have the numbers to show that like people are like maybe watching like the first episodes of and then not finishing or like with movies we now know that they're tracking shit like starting movies and just not finishing them and they know that stuff and so like they've been able to quietly stealth kill a whole bunch of stuff over the years because they've been able to say like nobody's watching this so we're going to pull it and nobody's noticed because nobody's watching. It's just those one or two shows that seem to have a larger audience than maybe they understood and maybe that has something to do with like the screen sharing or whatever, I don't know, that they've has bitten them in the ass, Netflix specifically. And I feel like Disney and HBO and all of these other services coming in and getting caught with their pants down now because they keep having to like pull shows and cancel shit and people are like what, but this is your product, why would you ever get rid of this, you own this, and like you're not it doesn't it doesn't cost you anything to have this up there. That's not true. That's just simply not true. There is money involved in having that shit available. And so like I said, there is definitely some conversation to be had about like are these shows getting pulled because people aren't watching them and they're just like they just don't want to waste the server space on them and the streaming, like the whatever like infrastructure is in place to get shit out to people. Like why dedicate it to a show that, 10 people in the world are watching? Like sure. But on the other hand, like there is also something to be said about the fact that like as a service, as an entertainment service, like don't you have some responsibility to have good work up there? And the truth is that there isn't, right? Like that second the answer to that second question is they have no responsibility to us
They can
as
do whatever they
consumers.
want with their
Right.
product.
Right.
And yeah. And I guess the one that really makes me sad, we didn't mention it, like Mighty Ducks Game Changers for the show,
Yeah.
right? We're talking inside baseball, behind the curtains at the Say Report. Like I was excited to watch the Mighty Ducks movies like in relationship to that series being announced and being done. But like it canceled after 2 seasons and now essentially lost media until they put it somewhere someday, right? I would
Right.
imagine they're going to try to like sell it off to someone. Who knows though, right? It's still the early days. Like I still want to cover D2 the Mighty Ducks, but then comparing it to Game Changers, like almost what's the point of it? Because it'll just
Yeah.
sound like we're talking fan fiction. Because you can't
Yeah,
go
I
out
mean,
and watch it. Like it's
right. I mean, the thing is that like I think Disney is going to do things like reinstitute the Disney Vault, like right. Like we'll see like for a couple of months they'll put the Mighty Ducks show back out again. Like say for like in coming this December, we're gonna redrop Mighty Ducks for a few weeks, but make sure you watch it because it won't be there forever. And like that's gonna start this whole kind of FOMO process again that Disney was Disney's bread and butter from the 90s and 2000s. Oh, sorry, we locked this movie away. There's no way for you to see it except for this Christmas when it comes out for 4 weeks, and then everybody runs out to grab the diamond edition of Beauty and the Beast or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
And we'll see those shows again, but Disney's going to start playing round robin with the Disney Vault again is what will happen. And people are going to get pissed and they're going to say, why are they doing this? And it's because that again, at the end of the day, the numbers make sense for them to do it this way. No matter how mad people get at these services, it takes news like Wells Fargo, a financial company, coming out and telling Paramount to like get their shit together or close down to really kind of give us a clue of what's going on behind the scenes. But from the outside, we can only assume that they're making these decisions because they benefit somebody financially.
True. Very true. Do you have anything else on this? Because there's one other big thing that happened in May that we've kind of been promising we're going to talk about. And we have a hard out today. So if we don't start talking about me crying in the kingdom, I don't know if we're going to get to this week.
No,
So,
we're good. The writer's strike is still happening. We support the writers still.
Yeah,
Everybody
definitely.
supports the writers. Get your fucking shit together. Like I'm not the writers, like the rest of us. We need to open the fucking doors for these guys and get them paid.
Yeah. It's I don't even know, man. I do support them. It's not that I don't support them. I just looking at the data, I don't know when this is going to happen. 100 days. As long as it's less than 100 days, I'll consider it progress. And we're already around 33 as of the recording of this episode. Oh, and I guess one other thing before we talk about Zelda. How I Met Your Father is back. I don't know a lot of people know that it came back on May 23rd. There's 2 episodes already released of part 2 of season 2.
Yeah,
And
I was
the
gonna say
reason,
2.5, right?
yeah,
Sorry.
2B, I think, is the way that they were calling it, 2A and 2B. But this is specifically for Sejohn, in case he's not aware of it. Clark Gregg has been in the last 2 episodes of How I Met Your Father.
Well,
So-
fuck me.
Yeah.
All right.
And doing a great job. So it's out there. We're watching, and, Oh, I guess one other thing, too. Natalie Portman, Sejohn, she might be single again. Would you be okay if you had to eat your ice cream alone again? Sorry.
Steph, your concern really warms my heart.
Wicked inside references to ridiculous rumors from when we were younger. Let's talk about Zelda, baby.
Yeah, I am all for talking about Zelda. I just don't even know where to start.
Well, why don't I tell my story? Why don't I tell my Zelda story? And my Zelda Tears of the Kingdom story goes like this. I, after about a week and a half of playing the game, wound up at the final boss. through like no trying, just exploration got me to the front step of the Demon King. And I'm still Devon Decker. That has not changed. So I beat my head against the wall to complete that fight with 10 stamina vessels and 4 hearts. Because there was no warp back to it, you see, Sejohn. And eventually I did it. Eventually, after a week of beating my head against the wall, and that's not even true. Like, I got there and then I didn't play for a week. And then the next day I went back after about 3 hours. I found my rhythm and was able to beat the first fight in that section, only to be greeted with a second fight that killed me in 1 hit. Again, 4 hearts at the point where I got there. And then I went back to the game. So here's the thing about Devon Decker and Tears of the Kingdom and how I can relate to this story. The game came out on May 12th, so I've had it for roughly a month, right? It'll be a month on Friday of this one. And I feel like I've accomplished literally nothing in the game. And I don't know how like to feel about that. I've activated all of the towers. I'm doing a bunch of light routes in the depths. Spoilers, if these are words that mean nothing to you, I'm sorry. But the thing I haven't done is gone to any of the regional phenomenon that need to be investigated. And that seems like where the game actually starts.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know. They pretty quickly said you should check out these phenomenon, and I did it. So like within the first like 3 hours of the game, I was I've got powers and all this other shit.
I have no
You haven't
powers.
started playing the game yet.
No, I haven't started playing the game yet. I have 6 hearts, and I've maxed out my stamina. And I haven't started playing the game yet. I completed what seems like the big quest in the depths. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun in the depths.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've played for 60 hours, and I went underground for the second time because pretty early on in the game they make you go underground once to just kind of show you that it's down there. I have not gone back since that. So 60 hours later, and I finally decided to go down under the ground again.
Yeah, well, that's the right decision. Because, spoilers, the fight against the end boss is down there. And I just like, I haven't been down this way yet. Oh, look at that. I'm at the final boss. Good for me. I'm going to get my butt kicked.
Yeah, man. I mean, you have missed out on a lot of really cool bosses. You've missed out on a lot of...
Well, I mean, I'm going to go do all this stuff.
Dragon tiers at all?
I have found 1 dragon tier. I have found other designs on the ground that will lead to dragon tiers, and I've marked them with stamps, but I haven't completed them yet.
Yeah. The dragon tiers are another kind of big part of the game, only in that that's where a lot of the story is. So like I mean, I don't even know what to tell you then, man. It's like you haven't you haven't started playing the game yet. Like, it's cool that you've been exploring for this long, and it's cool that you've been able to like do all this other shit. The shrines have been really fun in this one. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you can't use any of the special abilities in the shrine, so it's not like you would need to do those, but like you need to you don't need to, but like if you want to start doing that particular quest, you could start playing the game.
Right, and that's the thing, is that I think for me why I'm afraid, right? Because I did investigate the Goron City one. I had the first conversation in Goron City, so I met Yonobo, and then it's like, go follow up with him. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go back down to the depths. And I'm going to look for more light routes. And that'll be fun for me. And it's one of these things where I'm legitimately having fun with the game the way that I'm approaching it. But I'm a little nervous that if I go into the story, that enjoyment factor is going to stop. But also, my Switch has not been doing great. It died last week, so I think it's
the OLED.
No, my launch one.
Old one.
I haven't moved over. But I just in a raffle won a new OLED Switch, so I think that's going to be the impetus for me to like finally transfer over my stuff and stop praying that I'll be able to finish the game before my launch Switch just dies forever.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely encourage you to get off of the Switch that's giving you some trouble because
Yeah,
this game, this game has been a fucking experience on Switch. This
yeah.
has been probably the best gaming experience I've ever had on the Switch for sure. But honestly, one of the best gaming experiences I've had in a long time. And part of that is that ability to kind of walk away. So as I said, when I first started the game, within 3 hours, I was already doing kind of that quest line of like, where they say investigate this shit, and that was actually probably too soon because I found myself in a very similar situation to what you were in, where I only had like 4 hearts and some built up stamina, and only the bigger thing was I didn't have any like shit, like any fruits picked, any arrows, any weapons. I didn't like, and here I am fighting this boss. I went up to the Rito area. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about the narrative that kind of pushed me in that direction first, or if it was just some residual stuff from Breath of the Wild, because the Rito stuff in Breath of the Wild was just some of my favorite, and also led to my favorite power up and stuff in that game and
The
shit like that.
narrative
So
pushes you towards it. It says these are the 4 places you should look at. I suggest going to Rito Village first.
yeah, yeah.
That's per his exact words to you. So
Right,
I get
yeah.
it. The same
So
way I did Zora first in Breath of the Wild, because they say you should maybe go to the Zoras first.
yeah, right. Because when you go to Hateno in Breath of the Wild, they're like, the or Kakariko. I mean, they're like, the Zoras are nearby, and they're
Yeah.
suffering from this issue. But I mean, I don't know what to tell you about your fear that it's gonna ruin anything. I honestly think you haven't seen some of the best parts of the game yet. I mean, like
That's
the
I
dungeons that they put together for the various stories. Like, so I've done two so far. I've done the Rito and I've done the Zora. And man, like even the Zora one, like they managed to make a water temple that is just fucking fun. Like there's this whole like bit about like the ways in which you travel through water but up in the air that is like just was just a blast, like getting around and navigating in that shit. And yeah, so I legitimately, some of the best Zelda bosses, some of the best video game bosses I've faced so far, like the Rito one especially, when you're up in the air and you're up in the wind um temple, it is just like that boss was just so much fun. A lot of gliding and shooting while you're in the air and stuff, which was my jam in Breath of the Wild and has continued to be my fucking jam in
I am
Tears of the Kingdom.
I am saying spoilers here, and you can answer me honestly here. Is the boss of that a big bone dragon?
Yeah.
Okay, so I fought that big bone dragon because I hadn't beaten him in the temple. He was the thing I had to fight after the army of the Demon King.
Yeah, no,
So he
I've
showed
gotten
up.
the impression that it's a little bit of a boss rush kind of,
Yeah,
for the early parts of the Ganon stuff down in the depths. There is yeah, so you kind of replay the major bosses and then you go up against Ganon in a form. From what I understand, I have not done that fight yet,
right.
but that rings with what I've heard from other people talking about that fight.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's like this giant bone dragon, but like you need to aim for specific
you gotta
spots and
hit the
like
spots, and then
and like
I
it
did some
really
damage. Yeah,
yeah, and it was like really like it was really getting to me because one of the big things about it is you really have to start to figure out depth when you're fighting at that. And I was having some real trouble because I was not hitting a couple of shots that I swore should have been hitting and all of this stuff. But then, it forced me to figure out some shit really quickly because again, this was only about 3 or 4 hours into me playing the game and here I am in this fight. It forced me to really quickly learn a lot of the fuse stuff that they really want you to use in those kinds of situations because the shit that you could fuse with arrows and the various ways that it affects what the arrows can do was like night and day once I figured out that I could fuse shit to my arrows and what the different things would do when I fused them. Like became a completely different thing. And like the fight was still a fucking like head against the wall fight. Like I was really bashing my head against the wall for a while on that one. But when I finished it, it felt amazing. And the power that you get from that one is um not as good as the one in Breath of the Wild, but it's for a different thing. Like once I now that I've been playing, now here I am, 50 some odd hours later with it, and I really appreciate the power that you got. But there was a moment where I was like, that was super badass. What's my new ability? And then I got my new ability and I was like, oh, this is what I wanted because I wanted Rivali's Gale. That's what I wanted. However, I will say I have realized how much, first of all, Rivali's Gale would have broken this game. But on top of that, I've also realized that there's so many systems in the game that kind of emulate what Rivali's Gale did in Breath of the Wild anyway, that I don't need it. Like I have figured out so many other ways to go up in the air. So I understand
Yeah.
why it's not there. But that was like my only real moment where I was like let down a little bit by what was going on in the game. But it was super early in the game because I didn't really understand where we were going yet. It was before I had gotten a lot of other powers and knowledge about how to navigate the world. So like I didn't truly understand why that was the power given to me. But now that I've got that and I've got a few other things like the glider suit and shit like that, and like I really appreciate what I'm able to do now. The ways that the systems in this game, and this was true in Breath of the Wild, I cannot believe how much more true and how much cooler it is in Tears of the Kingdom. They really have evolved on a lot of really, really cool systems from Breath of the Wild. But the ways in which all of them work together to really give you these just beautiful, unique experiences that like I talk about something that I've done in this game with somebody and they're just like, I didn't even know you could do that. And vice versa. People talk about shit all the time. You know, it's like we learned with Breath of the Wild, people finishing the game in 10 minutes because they realized that up on the plains, if you grabbed a metal door and then just rode it into the castle and then just took on Ganon, like you'd be fine. Especially if once you got into the castle, if you grabbed the right weapons and armor from sitting around, like you'd be totally golden. And like people figuring that out was awesome and cool to watch. I could have never in my life fathomed even trying some of that shit. And it's the same thing with Tears of the Kingdom. Like talking to people, seeing the ways in which people are using the various systems in place to navigate around, to get to certain areas, to defeat certain types of enemies that I just didn't even think about using, A, B, or C on. It's just amazing, like the ways in which this game has allowed people to have such unique experiences. I mean, look at the way that you're talking about playing this game for so long and not even touching the story, versus me, who was in it in within like 5 hours of playing was deep in the story. I don't think that either of us played it the right or wrong way. I mean, like I'm jealous that you're going to be able to go through some of the stuff that I went through with as much stamina as you've now got. Now that I have I've got 2 wheels of stamina and I've got 11 hearts, I think. I also have a bunch of bright blooms or whatever the fuck they're called that the orbs that I have not handed in yet. So I could probably actually up both of those numbers right after this. But like I now feel like, oh, I can get around and do A, B, and C in a way that I couldn't before. Um, Although I say that, but I also spent about 10 hours really early on after I defeated the Rito stuff, went to go check out the Zora stuff, got to the the boss for the Zora stuff is one of the goofiest, most fun Zelda bosses I've done in a while. And again, the fact that it's at the end of a water temple was just like mind-blowing to me. But could not defeat this boss. I just couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong, and I realized it's because I wasn't leaning into any of the zonai is the right
Zonai,
that's I
yeah.
yeah the zonai like stuff that you're carrying, like the building the machines and stuff like that. I hadn't really gotten into that aspect of it yet at the time, so I bounced away from that fight because I couldn't figure out how to win it, and I spent like 10 hours just kind of figuring out, like, do I need to power up, do I need to get specific fruits, do I need to get specific types of armor or weapons. In that meantime, I was hitting up a bunch of shrines, figuring I would power up. And the shrines do such a good job in this one of teaching you all the different ways that you can use all sorts of stuff, weapons and items and stuff, but specifically using all of the Zonai devices. And like the ways in which the shrines really kind of push these like really fun little puzzles to learn how to fuse stuff together, how to move stuff through the air, how to stop and catch stuff, and like affect things to move in different directions and stuff like that. Like has just been eye-opening and was so much fun. So I just started kind of fucking around on my own. Right. And then once I did that, I discovered like, oh, if I put a water spout on the end of this spear, then I can do A, B, and C, and then I can get this muck out of the way, and then I can do this. And like I was like, oh shit, this is how you defeat that boss. Like it hit me at one point where I was doing something in a shrine and goofing around, and I was like, oh wait a minute, if I do this up there, then I'm golden. And sure enough, was able to get that fight done in like a couple of hours at that point once I figured out what I needed to do. So like the ways in which this game pushes you into those kinds of situations where you're like, I might be in over my head, and then gives you the ability to either keep banging your head against the wall and you can defeat it, maybe, like that's definitely a viable option. But also you could just walk away for 10 hours and there's still a whole bunch of shit to do. And in that doing other shit, you do start to learn like, oh, if I do this with this and I add them together and then like go after it in this fashion, like I can take on the fucking world in this game. And I just feel so powerful all the time in that game. It feels so good, no matter what situation I'm in, no matter how much I'm getting my ass beat. I never feel like I can't do it. I just always feel like I just need to step back and figure out the trick here. I need to figure out the puzzle. In a lot of ways, it's and I talked about this with Breath of the Wild too. It's the ways that you have always talked about, like Bloodborne and what's the
Dark
series there?
Souls,
I can't.
Demon Souls, yeah.
Dark Souls. Thank you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't believe I couldn't pull Dark Souls. But like that whole oeuvre of just like, you learn patterns, you learn the ways in which you get through these enemies, you learn new techniques and like, you learn if you dodge in just the right way, you can bounce to this particular area, which allows you to swing and actually get a couple of hits and then run away and then come back. Like learning all of that shit, like this is that game for me, right? And again, Breath of the Wild also had all of this. It's just I cannot fathom how they ever evolved that style of game into this. It is it is beautiful.
Cool. No, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear it. And I think by the next time we're here, I'm going to have begun my expedition into those parts of the game. I've been having a good time not doing it, and I'm a little nervous because in the beginning of Breath of the Wild I was excited, and as it went on I could feel the fatigue, and I don't have that fatigue yet. So what I'm doing now is clearly working.
Yeah, but I
And
mean, if you end up
yeah.
starting just the story stuff and it's not for you, like that, like I got 300 hours in Breath of the Wild. I have played through the story of that game to its completion once. I have done story beat stuff
Yeah.
other times I've gone into that game. I have restarted that game with the intention of finishing it, and I've gotten tired out and not finished it. I have not completed Breath of the Wild in its entirety since I lived in Toledo. So it's been over 5 or 6 years, and I
Jeez.
adore that game.
Yeah.
Right? I went back to it so many times, and like I feel like that's going to be the same thing with Tears of the Kingdom for me. Is I'm probably going to continue down this story path and get what I want from the story and all of that stuff, but. I have put so much time into this game now that if I don't get to the quote unquote like credits roll story end of this game, I'm not gonna feel cheated. I'm not gonna feel like I wasted my time. Like I have done so much in this game and pulled off so many amazing moments. Like I've just had, I had a moment yesterday where I finished a larger quest line, where and there's this beautiful like music moment that the quest line is building to. Like with every step that eventually there's going to be this moment where there's just going to be this gorgeous piece of music playing, and there's going to be a visually important moment. I'm trying not to spoil too much, but
Yep.
anyway, so I hit a moment where I realized, oh, I'm about to finish this quest, and this beat is about to happen. I've been so excited waiting for this. I literally like kicked the dogs out of the room and shut the door, turned on the surround sound, like just sat back and just let that moment happen. And it's like it was like life giving. There was like a 2 minute like cutscene in this maybe not even that long, that at the end of this quest line, and I knew it was coming, and it came, and it was beautiful, and it was just amazing. And like I said, I have not had moments like that in games for a long time, right? Like it's been literally like a decade, I think, since I've had a game hit me like this. Like I think of like sitting in my basement back in college, like playing BioShock or something like that, where I had these moments where I was just like, oh no, this is gonna be huge. Like the ending of I remember like the ending of BioShock, the third one there.
Infinite.
Um BioShock Forever or whatever the fuck it's
Infinite.
called. Infinite, thank you. Where I was just like, oh, I'm getting to the end game of this. Like I have probably 30, 40 minutes left of this game. At this point, I'm turning off my phone, closing my door, and if anybody's like who needs me, like they can find me in an hour. And like I remember that specifically. And the ending of that game is, for anybody that's never played it, is hugely, like it is effective. So we say. And like it was like that again, like hitting that kind of game moment for me again, which has not happened since.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear it. I've definitely gotten my $70 worth. I will say that. I was a little hesitant because of the price, but what I've done so far, beating the army with 4 hearts and like figuring out the way to do that, that was my big moment with this game so far.
Yeah.
Everything else is just like cherries on top. And that's kind of cool. So, yeah, we'll get there. But we do have a hard out. So, any other things you want to say? I mean, we can address this one going back. Like, this is not probably the last time we're going to talk about Tears of the Kingdom or other Zelda stuff on the show. So, anything else you want to say before we send this one away?
I mean, just on Tears of the Kingdom or in general?
In general, like, in general. My thing is not Tears of the Kingdom related.
No, we name dropped Guardians, but we'll definitely probably talk about Guardians for sure. If
I
not
think
in
once
a
it's
proper
available,
episode, maybe like a backup.
Yeah.
But it's out there. It is the end of a Marvel trilogy, which is always kind of a big thing to talk about. So I think we do need to dedicate a little bit more time to it than just 10 minutes at the end of an episode. But I adored that movie. I came out of that movie just really, really enjoying my time with it and really having some big feelings about, not just what happened in the movie, but, what it means for everything that we've seen before, and really curious to see where things go and all of that good shit. But, I encourage anybody out there that has not seen it yet to go check it out. And we will definitely be talking about it more in depth.
Yeah, that's for certain. But once people have the opportunity to see it, I think that's one that if you haven't seen it and you hear people talking about it, it could really be but definitely go see it now if you can. If you feel comfortable enough to get out to the theater, definitely check out Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And I will say the same thing about Across the Spider-Verse. But my big incendiary final thing before we say goodbye is after 6 months from its release date, in December of 2022, River City Girls 2 finally had its performance patch that repaired the issue that had it running at 30 FPS, despite it supposed to be running at 60 FPS drop. So I was finally able, and this was not related to the performance issue, this was related to the fact that a flag did not trigger when I completed a side quest, and my options were to play through the game on a new file and hope that it would trigger, or wait, because part of the performance patch is also the fact to do a New Game Plus a third time. Instead of just loiter New Game Plus the one time, you can now do it repeatedly like you could in the first game. So with the performance patch, I finally did that, finally got my platinum, and can officially say I hate River City Girls 2. And honestly, I don't want to talk about the game anymore, but, if you want to get in touch with me, I am out there. You can get me at The Stay Report or at Devon D. Decker on Twitter. I'd love to talk to the people about River City Girls 2. I can't give it any more time on the show other than the fact that, I'm done with it. I'm done. Sorry,
yeah, well,
I had to
end
say
of an era.
that.
No, I know. You don't have to apologize to me. We've had a lot of time on this show to talk about some issues that even I, residual from your conversations about them, have had with that entire franchise. So it's a shame. Not too surprising, and considering the storyline of this whole patch nonsense, just kind of fuel for the fire in that regard.
Yeah, and it's the 6 months after a 6 month delay, because remember when I sent you the article that was it's coming in July? Last May?
Yeah, last May.
It's been a wild ride with the game, so that's it. So yeah, so I think that's going to do it for this one. Thank you guys for coming on this journey as we recapped the parts of May that were not Brendan Fraser-y. Appreciate all of you. If you have anything to say to us, we are on Twitter at The Say Report. It's also the only way that you can get in touch with Sejohn is by writing him at The Say Report, since he got off Twitter a long time, and I know he would love to hear about your unique Tears of the Kingdom experiences. So get to him and find him and tell him all about it.
Yeah, and if you want to talk to Dev because you're curious about his opinions on River City Girls 2, you could definitely go back and listen to some older episodes where we talk about it, but I do know that there's been some off-mic conversations that we've had that have been pretty interesting as well. So go ahead and hit Dev up, but, be gentle. Understand that this is not a topic he wants to dive into, but is willing to.
Yes.
You can find him at Devon D. Decker.
Yeah, I mean, if all these people who have trophy issues, I still get messages on PlayStation asking how this trophy is supposed to work. And I'll always give the people help on that, but I'm just tired. The game, it's too much. Will, take us home so that I don't have to talk about it. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.